Hello everyone and welcome back to another Movie Nights movie review. Today we're going to be talking about Monkey Man. This is Dev Patel's directorial debut and it was co-written by him along with John Collee and Paul Angunawela. Forgive me if I said that incorrectly. And this movie is about an anonymous young man unleashes a campaign of vengeance against the corrupt leaders who murdered his mother and continue to systematically victimize the poor and the powerless. But the real question is, should people even see this movie, Nicholas?
Am I supposed to answer that now?
So yeah, if it wasn't obvious from Nick's comment earlier, I also enjoyed this film quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very well made. I think that most of the action sequences are incredibly well done, plus or minus just a couple small instances in the chase sequences. I think the chases themselves could have been done a little bit better, but there are more than one kind of first-time filmmaker mistakes in the movie. But that doesn't take away at all from the overall quality of the film, which I think is very strong.
No, and I think that sort of some of the biggest issues that the movie has is those first-time kind of mistakes that get ironed out as someone develops their career more. Yeah. But at the same time, the way that they are incorporated into the movie, like just those mistakes happen, adds such a uniqueness and a charm to the movie that almost work in advantage of it as opposed to being kind of detrimental to it.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's also one of those things where you can tell that Dev Patel both loves this genre, this action film, but also loves films and stories that are culturally rich and deep.
Yes. And
the combination of these, if you ask me ahead of time, do you think a film like this would work? After seeing the film, I'd be like, I don't know, you'd have a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I think for the most part, the film does a great job. I do think the pacing in the middle is a bit where the movie kind of drags a little bit, and it kind of didn't know exactly how to get the character into that final act.
Yeah.
Right, as, efficiently as they could have. But the overall idea of a character being on a personal vendetta that then becomes a spiritual vendetta for others, I thought was actually a bold move, and it's not something that you see in a lot of this type of like action assassin type of movie.
Yeah, and I think that the marketing, it's easy to kind of dismiss this movie as a sort of generic action thing, which is how they marketed it, because honestly, having seen the movie, it is a very hard movie to market just based off of all of those elements to it. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're actually seeing is something that is really culturally rich, spiritually rich, and sort of like this cathartic therapy session for Dev Patel. And I think what we talked about where these beats aren't happening, but what you're watching and the effort and time and dedication that he poured into this movie as a whole, you can't help but be rooting for it and overlooking certain things that would typically you would kind of criticize in a movie.
Yeah, and what I will say is something that we talk about all the time is there are certain things in a movie that bleed through a screen. Yeah. And passion is one of those things. And you can feel every ounce of passion in this film. And also, I think the film is edited very well, which to me is one of the hardest parts of action filmmaking, is knowing when to cut away from action, where to have the next setup for action, how long do I hold on this beat, how long do I cut away, when do I put in humor, when should this be a serious moment? And there are several instances in the film that just through the visuals and the editing, you see the story start to build. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a dog that's introduced early in this movie. And the editing of when he first meets that dog to what that dog end up being used for, I thought was really clever, and how they kind of shot that little montage.
And there are sequences like that throughout the film where you can very clearly see the wheels turning in his mind of how he's going to ultimately execute his plan.
Yeah, the character, yeah.
And I think that part of that too is there are instances like that with this dog character that work perfectly. And then there's scenes where there's sort of this interjection of comedy that to me just felt several times just kind of felt out of place. Mm-hmm. And at times, sometimes just a little bit goofy as well, like kind of going into there's that character that helps him out a few times. The guy with the, I think he had a limp, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's very funny in the movie, but then certain times with it, and like they have the chase in the car scene. You were talking about the chase scenes.
Yeah.
Just the goofiness of what you're watching, where it's like there's this souped up vehicle for no reason. Like that kind of stuff was where I'm like, all right, he probably could have.
Yeah, and it took away from the emotional stakes of that moment that character was at.
Yes.
And I also think that the thing themselves are funny, but just how it was put in and worked with the rest of the story is kind of what made it not work.
Yeah, like if there was setup to the jokes a little bit more, I think would have given a better payoff. But I even think with that execution, you probably would have been like, still kind of a weird time for a comedic beat.
Yeah.
But again, it's also what kind of makes the movie so unique is those sort of little blemishes in it.
Yeah, and I'll also say there's a bit with a window. I won't give it away.
Yeah.
I don't care. I laughed out loud in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
It was so funny. And to me, it was placed perfectly. And it almost was like a jump scare, but a comedic version of that. Mm-hmm. Of you're building, and then release. And then build again. Like start building again.
Yeah.
And to me, that release of laughter was worth building up that next part of the sequence. Because maintaining that pace would have felt weird to me if they didn't put that bit where it was.
Yes, but I think going back to that's one of those instances where as we see him sort of plotting the execution of the plan, had they established that earlier on, I think that payoff works better as a comedic beat. I still laughed when it happened, but after like a few minutes, I'm like, that was kind of odd, like an odd position to it. But I get to farther it. I think there was just a better way to execute that.
Fair. Something that I liked about that sequence is, one, to me, if it had been like set up earlier, then it would have defeated the purpose a little bit of his plan was going wrong. Because he kind of turned and was like, I guess I can try this, you know.
But they didn't establish him setting that up as part of the plan, which is sort of where
it wasn't part of the plan. That's like kind of my thing. Is like that wasn't supposed to happen. Like he finds himself in a situation and he's like, and then he goes and tries to do it. And it also, to me, is set up of he wasn't ready to do what he was doing in that moment. Like he failed, like in that moment. Now, the only part of the movie to me where I had to do like a big suspension of disbelief stretch is the halfway point where he is saved by something. And what he's saved by and what the film gets into, I think, is very interesting. It's very culturally deep. It's very thought-provoking. But it is very much a deus ex machina of, you're safe now. And that was very like, okay. Like I get why, for the story they're telling, the character had to end up in that place.
Yeah.
But how he got to that place was very... It did take me out of the movie for a minute of just like,
I think
he's fine.
What was interesting about that, and I do agree with that statement, was that what got me off guard is because, again, it's the expectations of what you're expecting from an action movie. Mm-hmm. And when that first sort of incident occurs, I'm like, I thought that this was going to be the whole movie.
Yeah.
And then you sort of go into this, he's getting saved. So obviously, let's say a bunch of stuff happens. I'm like, is it just going to be like another 40 minutes of like this? And I'm like, because that's kind of interesting. And then when that happened, it worked to its advantage because I really genuinely at that point did not know where the story was going to go. Mm-hmm. And I was now following along more on this journey. I didn't think that sort of predictable stuff would be happening, which was good to me.
Yeah. No, it was, I really liked the direction the movie took. It kind of elevated it itself in a way to what could have fallen into a generic action movie.
Yeah.
There
are those beats.
The
tropes
for sure,
and everything.
For sure.
But it is very... Yeah.
And then there's stuff where I feel like they did it just for me. Like there's an amazing metal song, Needle Drop.
The needle drops throughout.
Towards the end of the movie, that was amazing. And I also think the movie does a great job of, like you kind of mentioned earlier, playing with expectations to where here's the expectation I know you have. Here's where I'm going to meet that expectation. Here's where I'm going to subvert it. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like a one or the other. It was kind of like a moving flow of like meeting expectation versus subversion, kind of like a wave.
I think that the best instance of the subversion of expectations is sort of the bridge into the final kind of action set pieces is during his final fight in the ring.
Yeah.
It starts and you're like, okay, and here's this this payoff, and then something happens immediately, and you're like, oh,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I literally sat up in my chair. I was like, oh, they did that.
Yeah.
And again, that's when it works. Where I'm like, oh shit, what's gonna happen next? Like,
yeah, awesome.
And I also want to say, standout character Sharlto Copley as the ringleader.
I mean, everything he's in, he stands out.
Yes, that's a fact.
He's great.
No movie's ever been hurt by the inclusion of Sharlto Copley.
Facts, 100%, 100%. But yeah, no, I thought this was a great film. I thought the action was very well done. I thought that the passion bleeds through the screen. I think that it goes into places most action movies wouldn't go, but for the better. It enhances the storytelling. Yes. Does it have issues? Yes. Are there stumbles from a first-time director standpoint? Yes. Are there stumbles from an action standpoint? Yes. But the positives of this movie so far outweigh the negatives that after the movie, when I was kind of reflecting on it on my drive, when I drive home from movies is where most of my thinking happens. And on my drive, it took me more than half of the drive to be like, okay, what did I not enjoy? Like what I saw. Yeah. You know, like I was mostly just caught in the high of like, God, like that was awesome. That was awesome. This part was awesome, you know? Yeah. So,
and again, it's a very unique case where these sort of issues that come into it, to me, really just work to the charm of the movie, which is, I don't know how to, like, is that unfair to say? Because then why am I, why am I putting this in a separate bucket than other things?
Well, I wouldn't say it's unfair. I would say movies are kind of experiential, emotional events. Yeah. And if how you felt authentically watching it was like you're going to give it a little bit of a fighting chance because of X, Y, Z, then that's how you felt watching the movie. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though. I had a great crowd when I went to go see it.
Oh, I did too.
I don't know if, like, everyone was rooting. Like, he got in the ring in scenes, and people were like, like, there was, like, it was, like, actually, like, at a boxing match or something. Yeah. During the sort of third act when some characters show up, there was like applause. Like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, fuck them up, let's go." Yeah. Which I think was also just kind of fed into my enjoyment of the movie.
Oh yeah.
On top of that, because a rowdy crowd's always a dangerous thing in a movie theater, but when it's such a unified thing and it's out of excitement,
when it's towards what's happening on screen, it's great.
I'm always on board with it.
And speaking of which, thank God this came out in a movie theater on a screen, because this movie had a very interesting history before even getting to a theatrical experience.
Shout out to Jordan Peele.
So you can correct me where I am wrong here, but essentially, while the film was being made, Netflix had purchased it for $30 million, according to the Wraps, where we're getting this.
Yes.
It had been purchased for $30 million by Netflix, and then when the film finished, Netflix got cold feet and kind of dropped the film. Yes. And Jordan Peele had seen the film through, whatever social event. Yeah. And then loved it and kind of convinced Universal to buy the film. And Universal bought the film from Netflix for, according to the article, $9 million, which the math isn't mathing there, but hey, good for them.
If that's what it is, I assume more will come out the farther it goes into it,
And it was put into theaters, and the movie's production budget was only 10, but Universal only paid 9 plus marketing. So they don't have to make a whole lot for Universal's return on investment to kick in. So good for this movie. I mean,
and good for everyone, because Dev Patel was so involved in it. Dev Patel got pretty good payday, I'm sure, at this.
And also, I think I am very interested, and my ticket is already purchased for whatever Dev Patel directs next.
And here's the thing, because nothing has been confirmed, but the article mentions Netflix's cold feet, and people close to the movie, again, all really speculative at this point, was kind of dealing with the political undertones of the movie, which the movie, I would even call them undertones. Like, it's pretty, it's pretty
out there,
blatant political commentary. But it's so inspiring, because I think that Dev Patel, as you said, like, ticket bought, purchased, seated. Yeah. I'm already in the theater sitting for his next movie. The vindication that must be for a first-time filmmaker at that point. I know he's been involved in as an actor in so many things, but to like have this movie bought by Netflix and you're like, oh my God, like, that's crazy. And then for them to dump it was probably such like a kick you while you're down type thing, and then to have this come in and get the distribution, get the feedback that you're receiving on it, the critical praise that you're receiving on it, like, it's just such a good story.
Especially considering he probably felt, I'm speculating how he felt here, but he probably, when the film got dropped, and it's thought of, this isn't confirmed, but it's thought of like, oh, maybe it's because of how deeply political the movie is, he probably had a moment to himself of like, God, like I told myself I need to be authentic and how I feel about what's that situation and what's going on here.
Yeah.
But did my want for that just like ruin like everyone who made the film? Like, did that just happen? So I can't imagine like going through that feeling of like, like, should I not have done that? And I'm glad the lesson here was, yes, you should have done that. You should have told exactly the story you wanted to tell. You should have done exactly that.
I mean, it just like authenticity just goes
it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's I'm so happy I got to see the movie in a theater. I'll probably even watch it again because Hannah hasn't seen it, and it'll be very easy to convince to go see it because, you know, Dev Patel. But
this is fair.
But yeah, we both enjoyed it. We definitely think you should go out to the theaters and watch this one. It's really great. What do you guys think about the movie? If you've seen it, please comment below. We'd love to see your thoughts on the film. Thank you guys so much for watching the review, and we'll see you on the next one.